I can add to my selection by holding down Control, and I'm just adding vertices to my selection there, and using the pan and rotation tools to navigate around the table. So there you go, I've selected all the vertices on the corner of the table. Now in this case, if I do a uniform scale, you can see that this will cause a little bit of a problem, because not only is it pulling in the edges of my plinth, but it's also scaling them vertically, which is something that I actually don't want. So in this case I'm going to use scaling just on the Y and X axis. If I just select this here and scale in, and you can see that it's just scaling on the X and Y, so the height of the segment is kept the same. So there we go, we've created something a little bit more cylindrical. Now I think that maybe the base is maybe a little bit too sharp edged, and I don't think that'll look good in the end, so I'm going to move the table up slightly. There we go, the plinth, and I'm going to select the bottom faces. Here we go, and I'm going to extrude that down slightly. So with extrusion you'll see exactly how it works here. There we go, I'm using the settings option so I can actually modify the extrusion. There we go, that's just about the height that I want, and then I OK that. And I'm going to use the same tool to actually create a little inset here on the four sides of the plinth. But before I do that, I want to keep a little bit of space between here and here. So I'm going to create two more loops. So I'm going to select the edges by just using the marquee. In this case I didn't use the ring tool. And then I'm going to connect, and in this case I'm going to use the settings to do 2. There we go. They're a little bit too low and a little bit too high, so I'm going to select the loop here, move that up into the right position, do the same thing here, select the loop, move it down. There we go. And now I'm going to do the inset, as I said. So I'm going to select these faces using Control again to add to my selection. Oops. Okay, there we go. Oops. There we go. So we got the four faces, and in this case I want to both extrude and scale the extrusion. So I'll show you the difference, and in this case I don't actually want to do an extrude, I want to do a bevel, so I'll just quickly show you the difference between those two things. Let's do an extrude, and as you can see the faces have come outwards. I'll put it into shaded mode so you can see that maybe a little bit more clearly. But I can quite as easily do a negative extrusion. But it's just as easy to do a negative value, and then the extrusion will go inwards. Now I could just OK that and then use the scale tool and make the scale local to each face. But you can actually achieve both those things by using the bevel tool instead. So I'll undo what I've just done there. We're back to our normal faces, and I'll use the bevel tool as I said. So I'll click on settings, change the height of the bevel to be negative. There we are, it's going inwards, and you've got an outline amount, and at the moment that's -1, so we'll change that to be a little bit more subtle. There we go. So I'll OK that, and now we have a little inset on the plinth, which is pretty cool. I'm going to do the same kind of thing for the top of the table to make it look a little bit more interesting. So I'll just select this edge here. Actually, something that's happening is quite frequently I'm selecting edges and vertices and so forth on the opposite side of the object, which can be quite annoying when you're modeling. So a quick way to stop that is to turn on the ignore back facing option, and basically any edges or faces or vertices that are not facing towards the camera won't be selectable. So that's actually quite a useful tool, so I'll just turn that on there, and that'll save me some misselections from now on. There we are, so I've selected that edge. I'll create a ring from that, and then I'll connect those, and I'll keep it as 2 connections. That's cool. Then I'll select this edge and create a ring from that again. Just selected that ring. And in this case I'm going to do a scale. So I'm pressing R. And I'm going to scale them vertically. So I'm going to just grab on the Z-axis and scale it vertically. And then I'm going to do a uniform scale. But as you can see, it's actually scaling from this edge over here. So to get around that, I'm going to use a central pivot for my gizmo. And there we go. I've got my scale pivot right in the center of my selection now. And now I'm going to do a uniform scale. And that's scaled us out. A little bit more on Z. And there we go. I've created a beveled surface to the table. Okay. What else shall I do? What else would be nice on this? Maybe to make the base of the plinth a little bit more interesting, I'm just going to select these edges here. Here. Oops-a-days. Just lost my view there. I got my focus back on my object. It disappeared off there for a second because of mouse zoom, and I zoomed back on it by pressing the Z key, which will focus on whatever you currently have selected at the time. And there we go. So I've got those vertices selected. I'm going to do a scale, and I'm just going to scale on Y and X, and that will just, let's see what looks nicer, outwards or inwards. I think inwards maybe looks a little bit more interesting. So there we go. I think that looks quite good. Maybe no, I think that's okay. I think the only thing I'll do now is maybe make this bit here a little bit more interesting by pulling these vertices down here a little bit. I'm going to use Control to add to my selection. Make sure I haven't selected any vertices that I don't want to select. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And I'll press W to transform and just move these vertices down on Z. So there we go. Actually, I'll do that a little bit more. I'll go back to get my selection, undo, get my selection back, move those down a little bit more, select these edges here, do a ring, connect them. In this case I'm just going to do one. Select those that looper there, and move that up a little bit. You can see it goes in a little bit here, which doesn't look so good. I think it'd be nice if it actually flared out a little, so I'm going to select that loop and do a scale, uniform scale, and there we go. There's our plinth. I think that's looking quite cool. I think we'll stick with that for now. Okay. Something to check now that I've modeled this plinth is the smoothing. The smoothing basically is Max's smoothing groups is Max's way of actually working out where blend shading or Fong shading should actually smooth together polygons to produce what appears to be a smooth surface. Now in this case I'm actually going to go for quite an angular look for this plinth, and you can see there are some sort of funny shadowing effects at the bottom of these edges here. That's actually caused by erroneous smoothing. It's actually trying to smooth from this surface here to this surface here. Effectively they're in the same smoothing group, and when faces are in the same smoothing group, the shading engine, both in the viewport and in a full render, will try and smooth between those two faces. Problems can occur when the angle between those two faces is too extreme. For instance, anything over 45 degrees may look a little bit strange if it's smoothed. So you can go into face sub-object mode, and in this case I'm just going to use the auto smooth tool to work out the smoothing groups for me. Now quite a decent angle to use is something around let's say anything between say 10 and 25, so we'll go for 18 and just give that a try.